the head honcho here at Intentwise. So he's joining us today, and Jason Landro is co-CEO of Nectar. Works directly with brands on profitable Amazon growth and is going to share the playbook for driving incrementality. So welcome, Jason. We're so glad to have you, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about these topics today. I think there's a lot of content that's put out in this space, but a lot of it is not very technical. So I'm excited to actually dig in today and go through tactics that any brand can implement in its business or ask its agency to implement, or implement together with its agency to realize meaningful growth. And these are strategies that are essentially evergreen at this point, that any business can use to grow, as long as you have some revenue on Amazon, but really for brands of all sizes. So we're going to start with AMC, and then we'll move to search query performance. I think one big thing I want to note is Amazon recently started a beta giving vendors search query performance data. So we'll get into what that is and what you can expect from it. It's extraordinarily powerful data that you can, or as Amazon would say, signals to drive incrementality and measure it. So we expect that SQP will be rolled out to vendors in full, in a not so distant future. It's been available to sellers for a long time, and there are workarounds to get it for vendors. If you want to know, you can message me on LinkedIn. Jumping in here, just kind of high level, how we see that brands are growing profitably on Amazon. For a long time, brands anchored to ROAS. And on Amazon especially, it's a horrible way to drive incremental growth, because one, Amazon rewards brands that convert traffic well organically, in terms of giving them preferential placement in organic. If your advertising is driving that traffic on a keyword and it's converting well, you have good reviews, competitive price, etc. So your paid traffic can influence your organic placement and thus your organic traffic and sales. So if you're just looking at your ROAS, that really doesn't take into account how your advertising is influencing your organic. So it's a huge miss. And then what we see often is that brands that are ROAS driven overspend on branded search. It's not incremental. And we're going to get into how to measure that precisely with search query performance data. And so that's why the full funnel impact is so important, is you want to generate more demand. What we see in a healthy brand is that the amount of branded searches are going up over time. And Amazon gives you that data, and actually gives pretty much, if you're in the top 2 million, everyone can see it in brand analytics. So you really want to measure how your upper funnel and even mid funnel strategies are driving demand for your brand. And in fact, the more advertising you're doing off Amazon, you also want to analyze how that's influencing branded search on Amazon. And then I kind of talked about how you want to connect your advertising performance to your organic rank, share, and repeat behavior. Again, because Amazon is unique in how it operates. And Amazon Marketing Cloud is an incredibly powerful tool to connect dots, right? So what we're talking about with how is your upper funnel and mid funnel advertising impacting sales, So one, that's kind of the reporting side, but then two, how can you actually build audiences, target new to brand customers, increase your share of voice, right? You can use Amazon Marketing Cloud for all of those things. At this point, there's no excuse to not use Amazon Marketing Cloud, and even Amazon is democratizing access by bringing it into the ads console. The only real excuse is lack of education and therefore adoption. So there's no minimum spend barrier. I mean, you need to be spending some money on advertising to be able to get meaningful insights out of it, but whether you're spending $10,000 a month, $50,000, $1 million, there's something you can get out of AMC that can help optimize your advertising and make it better. And I know Intentwise is doing a lot of work there and a lot of great work. And actually going to show some AMC, at least one AMC report out of Intentwise that we use. Yeah. So, and if you have questions, make sure to send them. I will try to answer them in line if possible, but also obviously at the end. Kind of moving along, we tried to bucket for streamline how you can use AMC into kind of categories. So one way is measurement of your ad strategy and organic sales. Another way is to identify and create high-performing audiences. So think like abandoned cart, people that have added your products to the cart but haven't purchased. You can build audiences of them using AMC and retarget them. Also driving increased new-to-brand customers and increasing customer lifetime value. So for example, vendors didn't used to get any customer lifetime value data. That is now possible to get through Amazon. In fact, through the paid data set, you can unlock it for 5 years. This is incredibly powerful for consumable businesses because then you, instead of anchoring to, a one-time customer acquisition cost, you can actually understand the value of a customer over 5 years and then do math to back into what you are willing to pay to go acquire customers. And you can measure your new-to-brand customer rate, just like you would on structured D2C business on your own website. So now you can do this on Amazon and measure it. You can break it down at the ASIN-Level, all using AMC. We've built some of these capabilities Intentwise in our platform, Intentwise as well. There's a lot of software providers that are making this data available to you. And if you're a consumable business on 1P, you have to be using this. It's foolish not to. I think some of the most shocking things to me when we started playing with this data and unlocking it for vendors is how high some of the repeat customer rates were. We saw some pretty scaled consumable brands with like 70+% repeat business, which is really, really high. And you want to bring that down with more new-to-brand customers. So, now that you have this available, it's a very powerful tool. For more mature businesses, AMC allows you to connect what's going on Amazon with off Amazon. So your website, for example, or even in store. So there's a bunch of paid data sets where you can connect different reports and even audiences. There are certain companies that have partnerships with Amazon where you can feed in their audiences if you're trying to do an activation or target more precisely from a publisher or other company that has audiences that are more tailored to your products. So there's a lot you can do to connect the dots beyond Amazon to understand how your advertising is influencing not only your sales on Amazon but off Amazon. For a long time, walled gardens have been and still continue to be a major barrier, and just understanding just deciding your budget allocation and understanding which channel is most incremental. I think with what Amazon's doing in AMC, as well as the partnerships it's entered to essentially be able to bring premium, or not premium, but kind of the top inventory, except for essentially Google, YouTube, into the DSP, you're really seeing steps forward to break down those walled gardens. I think the next step is the walled gardens between retail media networks, hopefully. I think maybe we start to see some of them enter partnerships that pressure all of them to eventually work together to a degree. At least I hope. But for now, this is a great step in the right direction because Amazon is the most mature marketplace in North America and has the most share for larger brands that are spending a lot on Amazon advertising and have a meaningful in-store business. Being able to connect those dots is extremely powerful. So, do you feel like I'm leaving anything out here?
The only point I want to add is, obviously for 1P brands, the 5-year look back is something that they never had before at a shopper level. Now 3P brands, I think there's probably a few folks on the 3P side as well. There was some sort of a view from a few Seller Central reports where you had a hashed buyer ID that you could use as a unique identifier and try to understand repeat purchase behavior in CLTV. The difference with AMC is that previously that data set was not connected to ads, but in AMC it's now connected to ads. So there's something new and incremental for the 3P side as well. I just want to make that point.
Yeah, that's a great call out, and I think Amazon announced that it's restricting what it's releasing for the FBM orders, which may impact the hash customer ID. So that workaround may even be less viable moving forward, which is just another reason to be leaning into calculating customer lifetime value through AMC.
Yep.
So, for example, one simple but powerful report is the path to purchase report. So, a lot of people list out these reports on LinkedIn or in general. This is what it actually looks like. It shows you a combination of ads and here which one is leading to the highest purchase rate. What we typically see is that when DSP is in the mix with sponsored products, sponsored brands, and sponsored display, that there's a higher purchase rate. Now, yes, that DSP typically involves some level of retargeting, which influences that higher purchase rate, but it's substantial. The difference, even here, right? You can see that when you're just using sponsored products across, just the two of the ad types, the purchase rates are way lower. So, that doesn't mean scale your DSP spend to the moon, but it can often be helpful. And this is a higher level view. You can drill down into this more. You can create custom queries if you're doing things that are more nuanced, essentially, and segment this better. But a lot of people historically have said, how do I measure the effectiveness of the top of funnel DSP advertising I'm running? One way to do that, and initially to gut check it, is to look at the path to purchase and how DSP is influencing purchase rate, new to brand purchases, the new to brand purchase percentage, right? The path to purchase allows you to look at these things, and then you need to calculate, normalize them for the relative spend, right? So a lot of brands are spending a lot more on sponsored products than they are on DSP. So you have to make sure you're looking at it, with the same ratios, essentially. But again, as retail media gets more competitive in terms of on-site traffic, brands seem to be looking for ways to diversify and generate more demand. But it's important to be able to measure it. Everybody's accountable to somebody higher up about the effectiveness. And so path to purchase is one way to analyze that. We'll look at some other ways as well. And so we have a good question here about path to purchase. From Laura, how do you break down or think about DSP? DSP is the discovery touch, then drives search versus DSP as a remarketing touch after search. I think the path to purchase is more instructive, and then you need to query deeper based on the ad types. And so looking at this in a more detailed way, essentially segregating your remarketing ads in the DSP from your top of funnel advertising. So I would say that it essentially takes some work. It's not. It's very, very doable. But yeah, you need to continue to kind of drill down in more detail and segregate it out. Srinath, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think perhaps some of the audience members may not be like fully in tune with what actually sits inside AMC, and I try to simplify this to basically say, imagine a massive data set, although I shouldn't say data, Amazon would be upset, set of signals. Every interaction, all the way from impression to add to cart, add to wish list to purchase, is tracked at an individual shopper level, and all their media touchpoints also. And so what ends up happening is the insight you can get is really tied to the quality of the question you ask, right? So just remember that. There's, of course, a whole bunch of canned views in solutions like ours or Jason's tech stack. But knowing what is possible is going to be important, because that will lead to you asking high quality questions. I just want to put that out there. There's a lot of customizations you can do. Every business is unique and different. And so just if you keep that in mind, which is every shopper and every interaction is now available to you, there's a lot of things you can start to answer that you couldn't answer before, and create some very highly targeted cohorts of audiences, which will ultimately result in better outcomes on ad spend.
Yeah. So, and so for Laura's question, what you would want to do is create a query that essentially asks, what is the difference when they see a DSP ad first versus as remarketing? So, and you would have to craft that query more precisely. But then again, if you're only spending, $10,000 a month on top of funnel advertising DSP, which is not a lot, right? Like the time to do this analysis is not going to reveal anything meaningful, probably, that you can action. So part of it is not doing over analysis where it's not going to give you insights that are going to allow you to make an impact in terms of the optimizations that you would make from those insights. So that's where it's, I would say, how do you balance? You can ask endless questions, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And so how do you balance what you need to take out of AMC or you need to balance what you can take out of AMC with what you can actually action in your business and make an impact. Yeah.
So just for the benefit of the audience, Laura had a question, which is, in path to purchase, how do you break down or think about DSP for discovery versus DSP for remarketing? Besides what Jason said, I just want to add that when you think about path to conversion, there's many ways to capture path. So for example, in your naming convention for DSP campaigns, all your remarketing could have a certain naming convention, and discovery could have another naming convention. And you could have a path by the type of campaigns, discovery versus remarketing. You could set that up in a pretty straightforward manner. The key there, which I've noticed that number of advertisers or campaign structures don't necessarily do very well, is getting naming convention right. Because if you don't do that, there's no way to distinguish or bucket DSP campaigns into discovery versus remarketing. The real key is naming convention, because if you have that, you can set up whatever path it is that you're seeking.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I kind of assumed that in my answer. Sorry. So you can the analysis when you're looking at ad types is at the campaign level. That's why it's so important, because you don't really look at the on the sponsor side, you don't really look at ad groups. DSP obviously is a little more straightforward. Yeah. And actually, sorry, I want to talk about one more thing before we move off of AMC into search query performance. We don't have a slide on this, but one other really powerful thing is building audiences. So a lot of brands are getting traffic to their pages, and there's some great capabilities in the sponsored suite of products to target certain audiences. But most of that, except for sponsored display, is search based. They have to come back and look for that, and then you'll show up again, as opposed to following them around like you would in the DSP on and off Amazon. So, I threw out one earlier, like abandoned cart, but also you can go after, bid up for new to brand customers that are highly likely to, or that are kind of really in your audience profile, essentially, which you can do in sponsored and DSP. There's all these overlays that you can do and create those high quality audiences out of AMC. So it can really let you get more money, more bang for your buck in terms of how you're spending, to make sure you're going after more engaged shoppers, or more shoppers that are more likely to buy from you. Whereas previously you would just have to build more general custom audiences out of the DSP that weren't as tied to your data, if that makes sense. Srinath, would you add anything there?
No, I think that nothing more to add. I think that it's your data. The only part I would add is, when you're creating audiences, you can construct a pool of audiences that already got exposed to your brand, but for whatever reason, the criteria you're going after results in a small cohort. You could do lookalikes on them, which gives you a much, much bigger set of cohorts where Amazon is matching attributes of the cohort you've chosen. So lookalikes is another aspect of AMC that could be pretty interesting. But sometimes when you get to a really small audience pool, because your criteria is very specific, you'll have to rely on lookalikes.
And I just see there were some questions in the chat. Sorry. So trying to see. Oh, and the example of how AMC helps you measure, analyze D2C. So you can actually upload customer data from your D2C site to do a few different things. One, look at audience overlap. Two, to build audiences. So one great use, actually, Srinath just touched on, essentially, which is you can upload your D2C data, exclude those customers, and then build lookalike audiences off of them that you can try to target on Amazon. And there's many, many more uses of the data depending on your advertising strategy, I would say. Is it more skewed to Amazon? Do you have scale on D2C? Are you running online video ads? So there's a whole host of different use cases and how you can use that D2C data. Because if you're doing more on D2C, and you have scale on Amazon too, you want to make sure that they're not, that the frequency doesn't become too high, that there isn't, as much overlap, right? So you can measure the effectiveness. You're not wasting ad dollars, etc. So that's a great question, Sean.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
There was part two to the questions. I just we should just address that too. So do you do that via web pixel, or there's a couple of options there, right? One is, like Jason mentioned, upload your first party data. One additional opportunity you have when you upload your first party data is you can add on each record any number of custom attributes. So for example, when did they last purchase? What product did they last buy? You can add as many as you want, because then you can use that in either your analysis or creating audiences within AMC. Now, the other way is to put a pixel on the site, on your site, and that data comes through as well. At that point, you're also getting not just conversion data, but also traffic data. It just depends on what your first party data set is. If you have in-store sales, the web pixel is not going to help you, right? So some combination of the two is probably where you will end up if you are a business that has stores and D2C sites and things like that. It just depends on the complexity of your off Amazon business.
Yeah, and if you're running a lot of video, it probably is helpful to install Amazon ad tags on your website. Or if you're just getting a lot of traffic on your site and Amazon, that can be really helpful. And especially if you're running a lot of ads through the DSP in terms of spend and scale, because then you have a tighter feedback loop. Again, you can build audiences off those events automatically, depending on your advertising strategy. If you're more agnostic in terms of where you're getting those sales, like on Amazon versus your website, right? If you want to let the customer buy wherever they shop, then integrating ad tags on your website will allow you to scale your Amazon DSP a lot more seamlessly, I guess. And then Valentina had a question about how do you create AMC audiences that are going to target customers who wouldn't that don't only target customers who would have purchased anyway, right? Since DSP and sponsored products typically leads to a higher purchase rate. I think depends whether you're a consumable business versus non-consumable business, because you have subscription customers, right? And you want to minimize. It's a balancing act. You want to minimize your showing ads to the customers who are on a subscription and are past the typical point where they lapse, for example. But I think it's one, using some exclusions in the different audiences that you're building, so that you're not you're opening up the pool. So essentially, you're not just targeting someone who has added a card in the past 3 days, right? Because they're still in that high consideration phase, most likely. So again, opening it up to longer windows and then excluding the recent past, so that you're giving those people an opportunity to buy who are kind of in that recent consideration phase. Most Amazon ads reps will give you some pretty instructive data about your typical purchase windows, like whether customers are purchasing same day, 2 day, week, more than a week. It can help give you an idea of which direction you need to go with some of those exclusions, if you're just getting started with that. But I would say is playing with some of the exclusions, the way that you're layering the audiences, and not only targeting people that are at the bottom of the funnel with the audiences, because then you're really high risk of cannibalizing people who would have purchased anyway.
Yeah. And maybe one additional idea there would be, it's not really retargeting, or it's kind of retargeting, which is if you look at your click-through rates on sponsored ads, even the highest intent keywords, at best it'll be 2%, best case scenario, or right, usually less than that, which means that like 98% of people searching your high intent keyword haven't even engaged with your ad. So that's a cohort or a segment that you can start with as well when you think about DSP. It's not really retargeting. They haven't yet engaged with your PDP or clicked on your ad, but they have a very high purchase intent for whatever it is that you're selling. So that's another cohort that you can layer into your retargeting strategy.
We're getting a lot of good questions here, but I also want to make sure we get through the SQP data. So what we'll do is we'll come back to some of these if we have time. So search query performance, what is it? So search query performance lives in brand analytics. So I'm sure a lot of you seem very advanced here. That's great. You're familiar that brand analytics gives you the top 2 million terms, the click share, top 3 click share and conversion share in terms of ASINs for each term. But search query performance is more of a brand view of how those ASINs are performing on all the relevant keywords, your brand's impression share, purchase share, the total search volume, and there's a host more of metrics, both organic and paid. So in essence, it really helps you to understand the demand that exists, how much of it you're capturing, and essentially where you're under penetrated. There's a ton of different ways to use this. One way that I love is measuring the incrementality of your branded spend. And we'll get into that in the next slide. I obviously identifying high revenue search terms and seeing if there's more room to push. Right. So if you have a low percentage of the conversion share, you're spending a low amount of money on ads on that term, there's potentially room for you to take more conversion share, right? Also looking search volume and impression share, right? If there's high search volume and you have low impression share, but you're very relevant for that keyword, maybe you need to get in front of more shoppers. And then looking down the funnel, comparing your impression share versus your purchase share, but you need to improve your creative if you are getting a lot of eyeballs, but the conversion is low. Obviously looking at trends, prioritize low-hanging fruit. Sometimes we get caught up on trying to drive improvements for search terms that aren't actually going to, if you got 100%, it's not going to move the needle for you. But if you got 2% more conversion share on your top keyword in terms of those basis points, maybe that is more than the 5 keywords you were targeting, times 2. And then tracking how your ad spend influences really a lot of metrics, so share of voice, purchase share, and so much more. I believe that this search query performance is the number one most powerful tool set that Amazon gives you that most brands don't effectively use. There is a way for vendors to get this data currently. And I think if we lean into this heavily and quickly, typically in the first 30 to 60 days, we're managing advertising, can leverage this to make a lot of changes that drive highly incremental results. Because there's this wealth of data, it can be hard to process. So granted, that is one of the challenges, is how do you process and trend this data? It's the number one underutilized thing. So what you're looking at here is it's the search query performance data on our platform at Arrive that we trend and correlate. So you can see here that the metrics are purchase share, click share, impression share, ad spend, search query volume, best rank. And so you can look at 2 of these at the same time. So essentially you can look, I think one of the easiest ones to conceptualize is trending your ad spend against purchase share at a keyword level. So you can look, as I'm spending more money, is it increasing my conversion share? As I spend less money, does my conversion share change? Right? So if you spend less money on a keyword and your conversion share doesn't change, then you were wasting money. So when people talk about, there's branded search, there's no way to measure it, that's wrong. Search query performance provides you the exact way to measure the effectiveness of your branded search and how much you should spend. Granted, it can ebb and flow, but what you're seeing down here is this data charted. So we're looking at purchase share. If you could imagine, we took a screenshot of generic terms, not branded terms. But this is still the purchase at for the brand, because search query is first party data from Amazon for your ASINs. But if you were to show branded terms for your brand on this table, you would see your branded purchase share. And so as you can then experiment with spending less money on those terms and seeing if your branded purchase share moves. Now, typically for branded purchase share, we say it's 95%. So what you want to do is find that inflection point. What is the least amount of money you can spend at your optimal branded purchase share? We make this easier because we're programmatically pulling this data. It refreshes every day in our platform. But you can also just pull the data and do it in Excel. It's there, it's available. But to me, that's one of the easiest ways that brands can clean up their advertising and get more incrementality, is testing their ad spend against their conversion share on branded terms. Just in the interest of time, another thing that you can do using brand analytics is looking at the search term and how much you're spending and what your conversion share is. So again, we pull this in automatically in our platform for every single ASIN. But you can see here, for example, this brand for this ASIN up here has some higher conversion shares, but some low ad spend. So this one They've been in the top 50, top 3 for conversion share 2 times, but they're spending $0. So what would happen if they spent more money? They would probably appear in the top 3 more than 2 times in the past. I think this was pulled for 52 weeks. This is a great way to find incremental revenue opportunities, overlaying your ad spend against the brand analytics data. We trend this data. It used to only be scrapable, where you'd have to download it and essentially upload it. Now they released the API maybe a month or 2 ago. This data here is from brand analytics, and where we overlay ad spend. And we can do this with a brand's own ASINs as well as competitor ASINs. So this is not SQP data. So this is a great way, again, to find incremental revenue opportunities. You can do this on your own using downloading reports out of brand analytics and your ad spend, or your advertising reports, looking at your ad spend at the keyword level and aggregating them. Obviously, that would take some time, but these are tactics that we're using every day to find incremental revenue opportunities. That doesn't mean that if we spend more money on one of these keywords that it'll work, or we don't have a crystal ball. But a lot of it is trying to find the best keywords and ASINs to spend more money on. And you can validate this by looking at your competitors. How do you compare from a price point perspective? How are your competitors? What is their conversion share and count of being in the top 52 in brand analytics, either click share or conversion share? And you can formulate some really good hypotheses that you can then go out and test. Whereas a lot of advertisers are just looking at the ROAS at the campaign or the keyword level. It's very it's kind of like operating in the Stone Age when you have all this data available that you can use to go out there and optimize your campaigns and strategy. Our platform does allow for self-service. I think there's a question for David. Sorry, I'm popping back and forth between the questions and the chat because we're seeing both. And we have a couple more slides. I think, how much more time do we have, Srinath and Rolando?
Let's get through the slides, and then we'll go through the questions.
Something that we do is we have a P&L tracker. There's lots of software out there that gives you a P&L tracker. So I'm not necessarily pushing this as much as I am pushing iDerive, as I am advocating for understanding your P&L. We have it for 1P and 3P. When we're connected to account, we can pull out all the chargebacks, shortages, the terms from a 1P account. And our software allows brands to upload their landed cost, so they can get to a true contribution margin and then be able to filter it by product, child's ASIN, parent ASIN, custom group, category, whatever. So being able to understand how your advertising is impacting your bottom line is really, really important, so that you can tailor your advertising strategy accordingly. And this is where I think Amazon often gets really complicated. Is you might advertise the lowest price product because it has the highest click-through rate, but then you need to look at the PDP as a whole and see how it's performing. Maybe that low product is a loss leader, but you should be allocating the advertising at the parent ASIN level or the category level, because you're just using that one product as a loss leader, essentially. So I think it's really important for brands to be understand their contribution margin on some automated and regular basis, as opposed to doing a monthly roll-up of the numbers in your Amazon business, because doing that monthly roll-up doesn't allow you to really inform your advertising strategy. Often what we see is brands should be investing a lot more money on certain SKUs or parent ASINs and deprioritizing others. But if you're doing just a macro level profitability analysis, then you wouldn't get to those insights. And it's really, really important, right? We talk a lot about advertising and scale and revenue, but revenue only does so much, depending on how profitable that revenue is for your business. So you really need the left hand to be talking to the right and vice versa, or working with. So we talked a lot about LTV analysis. Now that this data is available through AMC, it's really important if you're a consumable brand to lean into that and being able to look at the month-on-month retention trends. Where's the drop-off, but also what is the value of a customer? We have that as well in a different table, so that you can start to back into, okay, what do we spend to acquire a customer? When should we be retargeting people with ads to make sure that they get over that hump? Maybe month 3 is where customers typically start to drop off. But you need to know where that is to tailor your advertising strategy accordingly. Because Amazon is not as, they own the customer, so you can't communicate with them in the way that you would on D2C, like sending an email, are you enjoying the product, or make sure you're doing XYZ to get this out of it. Right? So you have to be a little more creative or crafty when it comes to Amazon. But you've already spent all this money to acquire them. You want to make sure that you keep these customers. And so understanding where that is, where those drop-offs are, what a customer is worth to you is really, really important, in my opinion, especially now that its data is attainable. All right, I sped through it, Srinath. I don't know how much more time we have for questions.
I think we can take at least a couple of questions. I think, Rolando, is that good?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jason, you're quite the hit. The engagement was definitely off the charts here. But just let me make everyone aware, if we don't get to your question live, we'll definitely follow up via email. So
there's a question from Candice here, which is, what is the minimum D2C audience size recommended to build a lookalike audience? I don't know that there's a recommendation, Candice, as much as, for example, on the lookalike side, there's about 5 degrees of specificity you can choose. And the most specific, which gives you the smallest size of audience, can get you 500,000 people. So, and from Jason, if you have a point of view, feel free to share.
So
but it's less about sorry, go ahead.
The technical, I'm sure there's a minimum size that there has to be a minimum number of entries on the list, right, to create a lookalike?
I don't
have to go look at the technical requirement. I remember, for example, like Facebook was 50 or 100. So I imagine back in the day when, so I imagine there's some technical requirement that your list has to be of a minimum size, but beyond that, no.
Yeah. So there's that. David, hey David, how are you? David's question, Jason, is how do you tell the organic position of the keyword for the brand? I think he's probably talking about from brand analytics data and stuff. Is that?
Yeah.
So my understanding, Jason, correct me if I'm, there's no organic position information in the brand analytics data or search query performance data. We're tracking that separately by actually, grabbing search result data at a keyword level on a regular basis. That's how.
Yes. So scraping is the way that you have to do that, which is an approximation, essentially. Yeah. And then also looking at bestseller rank is another way to do that. So that Amazon doesn't provide that data saying that, you're in organic position 1 or 2.
Let's see, maybe one more question.
We don't know when the search query performance report will be rolling out in VC accounts. Amazon didn't really announce the beta. They just started adding it to certain accounts. Because it's already available and has been for years in seller accounts, I don't see this being, one of those betas that they open up and then close down. It would be very, very odd. They do typically take longer to roll out features that are available in Seller Central to Vendor Central, but I have not been given any information on that. Timeline.
Just one. Let's take one last question, Jason. There's an interesting question from Daniel Frayne. I'll just read it to you and the audience. is there a threshold of spend and sales that should be reached before utilizing AMC audiences? And is there best practices for attaching top of funnel, mid funnel, and bottom funnel audiences to certain specific campaigns?
I think the first question is kind of like the last one, which is you need some level of spend, otherwise you won't have enough money to get in front of those audiences. What that number is kind of hard to say, but I would say that if you're, it depends on the number of products you have and how much you're spending against those products. But I would say if you're spending $10,000 or more a month on Amazon advertising, which is like at least $300 a day, there's probably you're probably going to be able to get something meaningful out of doing that. Srinath, do you agree?
I think maybe there's a couple of proxies for spend levels, right? So if you're doing DSP, this is a no-brainer,
Yeah.
right? So the assumption is you are at some scale in sponsored ads and you're trying DSP. So that's one way to address this. The other thing is within sponsored ads, you can still create custom audiences. I mean, if you look at the evolution of sponsored ads, it started off with auto campaigns a long time ago. Then we got keywords. Then we got product targets. Now the leverage really is in audiences, right? So even at small scale, you could create audiences and then start to target them in sponsored products, sponsored brands, sponsored display. But I'll make up a number. Let's just say you can get about 5% more efficiency on your conversion rates. Is that material relative to your ad spend is the question, right?
Yeah, it's hard to give an answer on the low end. Yeah, but I guess that's my answer was the best one I had for the low end. Yeah. And then I don't think there's a best practice per se in how you attach those audiences. I think it depends. I would say more about the ad type. I mean, where those ads are being placed, then they are like, the product attribute targeting. So for example, like if you're building audiences around people that have already engaged with your PDPs, using sponsored display or DSP is probably going to work better because it'll transcend search versus trying to reach people that are in aisle, but maybe they looked at a competitor page but didn't purchase, for example, going or just customers of a certain type that are in aisle. You want to be more present in search as well, so using sponsored products. So yeah, I think it's a lot more nuanced in trying to understand what the audience is and how they've interacted you, whether or not they've interacted with you, that dictates it is how I'd probably frame that.
Awesome. I do have one last question for you, Jason.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot. But if you had to distill today's session into one, if you remember nothing else, a takeaway, what would it be?
Don't be afraid of all the data, and embrace it, and don't just do things the same way because it's comfortable and familiar, because the way that things have been done is not the way to get the best results moving forward, because retail media, Amazon advertising especially, have dramatically evolved their capabilities in the past couple of years. And so you have to figure out how to evolve with those new capabilities if you want to stay ahead, grow, succeed, be profitable. So I would say push yourself to get out of your comfort zone, embrace all these, all this data, all these features, understand how to apply them to your business or work with people, companies, consultants that do, so that you can continue evolving, what you're doing and grow.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. And
thanks for having me.
Thank you. And before we wrap, a quick heads up. We do have our next webinar lined up for next Tuesday. Probably see it on your screen. There's a link there so that you can go ahead and register. So it'll be next Wednesday, same time, same place. We hope to see you there. And the topic is going to be an interesting topic. It's including Levanta, and we're going to touch into Amazon affiliate marketing. So definitely you'll want to be a part of that. And thank you, Jason, so much for joining us today. As we could see, the audience loved you, and Srinath, thank you so much as well. And we'll see you all next week. Take care, everybody.